Well, good evening. I would tell you it's a beautiful day, but I'd be half lying to you if I did that. It is nice enough out. It's warm, it's sunny, but it is competing to be the world's windiest day yet again up here on the hill. I'm about to go out and feed the pigs, and I'd love to show you the pigs, but as I mentioned today, it's just far too windy. It'd be like pigs in a hurricane. But as you recall, we're running the pigs in our garden. And the intent there is to have them stir in some of their own manure, some other amendments such as straw, compost and whatnot, stir that into the clay and then help, amend the soil without us really having to do a lot of the work. And we've had varied success / challenges with that. The pigs have been able to stir in some stuff around the surface, but they haven't really been able to, root down, to any kind of significant depth, just because the clay is so very, very hard there. But the question came up today, why not back to Eden gardening versus, just addition of compost, or even we had a truckload of peat moss delivered the other day. So what is the right thing to do? What is the best thing to do? And I think that question is better applied in a sense of not so much what's the best way to do, but what's the best way to apply each of these in your garden. Now in 1842, in his first law on thermodynamics, Julius Robert Meyer said that you can neither create nor destroy energy. What's important to know is that the same is true in your garden. So essentially, if you want to create life from the soil itself needs to be alive. Now, what I have here, this is some of the peat that we had recently delivered. So you can see peat is a fairly benign substance. It doesn't actually possess, bacteria or weed seeds or anything like that. It's a fairly benign dead substance. But why it's beneficial is because it acts like a sponge. So this at one point was a living material, but through the process of decomposition in the absence of oxygen over thousands of years, you get this, and this is still moist. This is very fresh. You get this spongy, very water retentive, very nutrient retentive material. While that peat isn't going to directly provide the nutrient source, what it is going to do is provide room to grow, and that's important. You remember the carrots we dug out of our garden? Imagine if they had this much room to breathe. They sure wouldn't be those short little stubby carrots that are every gardener's nightmare. The other thing the peat's going to do, and this is, it could be taken as a negative, or it could just be something that you need to be aware of depending on the soil type you have, is it's going to provide a huge carbon dump, because it's all carbon-based material, and so you're going to need to offset that probably with some manure or something like that, and that's where you bring that soil to life. The other thing it's going to do too is provide you with a pH dump. So it's going to drop your pH, depending on the amount obviously, but it could be significant. And again, depending on the type of plants you're trying to grow, that may or may not be an issue. If you're trying to grow woody or viney plants, or things that require a lower pH, not an issue. If you're trying to grow lettuce, well, yeah, or kale, it's not gonna go very well for you. So that brings up the big difference now between something like compost versus something like wood chips. Now, compost and wood chips are the two living substances that you can add to the garden. So compost is gonna create basically a bacterial decomposition, whereas wood chips are gonna create what's called a fungal decomposition. And two very different environments. Now, if you can imagine if you tried to plant lettuce inside wood chips, and some people do manage to do this successfully, and that's fantastic, that's great. The soil conditions below are probably already favorable for that. But if you're working with unfavorable soil conditions and you're just trying to dump wood chips on, and then trying to direct seed, either in the wood chips or directly below the wood chips, you're going to have very limited to minimal success with seed starts and things that are, that are annuals, I guess. Whereas more perennial things like vines or trees or bushes or things like that, they would do much, much better with a wood chip. The other thing for a wood chip is, what are you trying to do? You're trying to feed the soil, but you're also trying to prevent, I guess, unwanted growth, right? So the weeds are still going to come. You're reducing photosynthesis, and a lot of the weeds are easier to pull just directly out of the wood chips. Quite often, if you've got compost in your garden too, the weeds, they come out much easier, but the weeds will come a little bit more prevalent. So not to take 10 minutes of your life that you're never going to get back and provide you with no solutions, But essentially, there's no clear answer here. The Back to Eden garden works well under certain circumstances. Heavy compost, again, works well under certain circumstances, as does peat moss. It all depends on your soil type and really what you're trying to grow in that soil once it's amended. Anyways, I'm about to mix up 10 gallons of pig feed because, yeah, for all the work they do in the garden, they sure work up an appetite. So yeah, whatever you're doing in the garden, I wish you the best of success. I'm gonna mix up this pig feed, then I'm gonna go inside, mix myself up a cup of tea. So I hope you have a fantastic evening. We'll see you tomorrow.